I'm so excited for this panel. We're going to be talking about social good. We like to talk here in Phoenix how we're the most generous community. And so I'm really excited to hear a bunch of little nuggets from this talk. So from Washington, D.C., we lost her to D.C., but she's still at Seed Spot, which we love here in Phoenix. Lauren McDanell, it's good to see your face.
Hey, Kate, it's great to be back at Phoenix Startup Week. It's so good to see you. And I'm just browsing through the webinar attendee list right now, and I'm seeing so many familiar faces as well. Great? So yeah, good to see everyone. And I cannot wait until flights resume to be normal because I've got a trip planned back to AZ actually just in a couple of weeks. So I get to bask in the AZ sun with you all here soon, everyone. So we are here today to talk about innovating for social good. If you're not familiar with Seed Spot yet, we are a social incubator and accelerator just for entrepreneurs who want to make social good, who are impact driven. And there's a lot of great stuff about impact entrepreneurship, and there's a lot of misconceptions out there in the market. So we've gathered together for your viewing pleasure and learning today some amazing panelists who are all social entrepreneurs who are studying social entrepreneurship trends throughout the country and the world. And we're going to just take the next hour or so and chat with them about what they're doing. And then if you're thinking about pursuing social entrepreneurship or making your current venture a little bit more impact driven, we're going to get some great tangible takeaways today. So the first thing we're going to do is just ask our panelists to each go around. So we'll kind of go in alphabetical order. We'll start with Erin, then we'll go to Danya, then we'll go to Yossuf, and we're just going to hear their quick kind of their why. So panelists, would love to hear from you. 60 seconds. What's your why? Why did you get started? What problem are you solving? And then what are you doing to solve that problem? So we'll kick it over to Erin first.
Thanks, Lauren. Well, I've been on a journey through the Phoenix startup ecosystem for 25 years. So I've seen it grow into something of abundance and actually making a shift to actually make an impact on other ecosystems outside of Phoenix. So it's been great to be part of that. My why really started at jobbing.com many moons ago, where I built Jobbing TV, and we really before Simon Sinek, we really went out and asked people, what was their why and what was their purpose. So it set me on a journey to help other people find their purpose. And that led me down to a path as how do I help people think bigger and actually get into exponential. So I was entrepreneur in residence at Singularity University and spent close to a year at NASA Ames campus in Mountain View, learned from some really big thinkers of just how do they expand on making an impact and making good. So I've really shifted now to my why to a thing called exponential theory, which I've just recently finished a book on that'll be coming out this fall that really examines how big thinkers start to think about systemically and actually start to do social good by thinking systemically. Once you start to have an ecosystem as your customer base, you can no longer act and be ignorant to customers that you may have before. So I've done a deep dive on that, and that's really become my new why is to do some leadership coaching to help CEOs basically think bigger and then actually think more systemically and solve bigger problems at the same time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the intro, Erin. Let's go over to Danya.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. It's so great to see you all today. My why started when I was an undergraduate student studying abroad in Spain, and I learned about the issue of drink spiking. And when I returned back to the US after having experienced and also seen numerous times the detriments of drug facilitated crimes, returned to the US, started talking to some of my friends and had the conversation of, have you guys ever heard of this? Have you ever seen something like this? And oftentimes it was yes, either they'd been affected as well or someone they knew was. And it raised in me, why is no one talking about this? Why are there not products actively available for people to empower themselves? And where's the content and education to ensure people are able to empower themselves in social settings? So it started as really on me not choosing entrepreneurship and being naive and saying, well, if there's nothing out there I would use, why don't I create something? And the naivete led me on this beautiful journey to be able to be sitting with you all today, 3.5 years after having started the company. And every day working on championing an issue I'm extremely passionate about, which is that my company works to empower, educate, and advocate against drug facilitated sexual assault and crime. So that is to the core my why. And I'm so excited to pass it off to my dear friend Yossuf, who has an amazing story as well. So, hi, Yossuf.
Thanks, Danya. It's great to see you, and thanks to everyone for joining in remotely during these weird times. But hopefully, we'll all be back in person soon. Similar story to Danya. To me, I never really expected or planned to be a social entrepreneur or in the social impact space. I started a company about 4 years ago that's focused on preventing prescription opioid abuse and addiction. To me, it's very close to my heart. I actually struggled with addiction as a teenager and seeing a lot of people lose the fight to it. And so, it's something that it was a gap, I guess, in the market, and I felt that we needed to find a solution to alleviate it. So I got drawn into it when I was working at a rehab center just about a year before I graduated from college. And, there's definitely a sense of imposter syndrome in the beginning, and hopefully we'll get to it later. But I really believe that there's never a better time to start than today. We're always going to feel reluctant, but you never know where the future is going to take you. We're 4 years into it now, and we've raised venture money. We've taken the company through various accelerators like 500 Startups and Halcyon. We've been lucky enough to partner with leading research centers. And so, you never know where the journey is going to take you, but if you're passionate about what you're doing and you have a good sense of what you're solving, I really believe you'll go quite far.
Wonderful. And welcome again to all of our panelists. We're so grateful to be able to learn from your expertise today. Yossuf, I want to keep it with you for a minute, and I'd love for you to share in your mind, what is the relationship between social impact entrepreneurship, kind of entrepreneurship in general?
That's a great question, Lauren. And, to me, I think they're actually very similar. Except that with social entrepreneurship or with social impact entrepreneurship, there are a few more metrics that matter. But at the core of it, you are starting a business. At the core of it, you should have a value proposition. You should have clear-cut customers or users, and a path to product market fit. Whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit. At the end of the day, you're trying to grow a sustainable business. And I think the more you think about social impact entrepreneurship and trying to find that business model, I think the better you are at creating a sustainable company. And at the end of the day, all of our goals is to create something that has large impacts. And so I think sometimes we think that social impact does not have or does not require you to, generate revenue or think about it as a business, because it takes away from the impact that you're trying to create. But I really believe it's one and the same. However, you also don't want to lose sight of what matters. And so the additional metrics that matter is, whoever you're serving, at least in our case, it's alleviating addiction, right? So we look at the number of tablets that we've been able to reduce, the number of pills that have been prevented from being diverted. So there are metrics that we quantify that maybe other, businesses don't necessarily look at, and they're basically looking at the revenue or their profits. But I really believe that you need to come in with assumptions and trying to validate your business model along the way.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Danya. And as an impact-driven entrepreneur yourself, can you talk about some metrics that are important to you, both kind of some of the things that you're viewing as success within the business, and then you also talked about being an advocate and doing some education. So I'd love to understand what that success means for you as well.
Yeah, and I think that Yossuf really underpins that conversation really, really well in understanding that as a social impact company, I'm taking into account all of the KPIs that every company takes into account, right? You want to understand the lifetime value of your customer. You want to understand who is your customer, your profits, the margins necessary, all of the numbers that any business needs to be able to sustain itself, right? Because there's often a narrative that social impact companies do not need to, are not sustainable. And that's not true, right? As any company, but we're more triple bottom line in terms of you're good for people, planet, and the third one, someone fill in for me. It's good for everyone. So that's just to say, our KPIs are very much in line with all other companies, but as you mentioned, Lauren, in our previous conversations, we really also pride ourselves on promoting education, and the KPIs for that can be the number of people that are educated, the type of content that's put out to universities that then can be dispensed to students. But I will also tell you, yes, so KPIs, key performance indicators, thank you. I'll also tell you that when I started the company in 2017, 2018, it was very hard to have key metrics, and I'm really appreciative that Yossuf brought up the imposter syndrome. I'm really appreciative that this can be a forum by which we talk about mental health and entrepreneurship too, not just specific for social entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs in general. And I'd say that the greatest KPI I had at the beginning was when I would pitch or have presentations or conversations, the people that would come up to me after say, thank you for talking about this. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for what you've said. I've had similar experiences, or someone I know has. And it's really that relatability of, we are creating a business, but also impact along the way. And being able to impact people through the business has been the greatest blessing. So there's a lot more KPIs, but I really love what Yossuf said, that it's just adding on the layer of complexity, because now you have more intangible alongside tangible measurements that you're keeping track of.
That's great. Thank you. Erin, I know you've been doing some research across the spectrum of entrepreneurship and impact entrepreneurship. Can you share, what you're seeing in terms of trends, KPIs, or key performance indicators that entrepreneurs are using to measure and track their social impact?
Yeah, I think around the triple bottom line that Danya was talking about, to kind of build on that, is I actually changed it a little bit. I think it's known as people, planet, and profit, but I use people, planet, and purpose equals profit. I think we've now shifted where driven companies align their KPIs to their outcomes. So they're looking to figure out, how do we actually build a business or value proposition that's driving through and creating that impact at the same time for whatever cause it may be. A couple of example best practices I look at is there's a company out of Amsterdam that I visited several times on innovation tours that I actually have a good friend I used to work at Accenture 20 years ago with. That's their spokesperson, Tony Chocolonely. So if you're not familiar with this, just by me telling you about the company, you're probably going to change your eating habits of chocolate. So the majority of chocolate companies in the world actually buy chocolate from slave labor in Ghana and Central Africa. So Tony Chocolonely's only purpose is to have slave-free chocolate, not just for themselves, but for the industry. So their metrics are how they've changed other chocolate companies. Now they've become a $100 million company because they are purpose-driven, but their key metric is really, how do we actually build awareness so that people stop buying chocolates that are from slave? Because if you eat a Godiva chocolate, a Hershey chocolate, you're literally supporting a slave ecosystem in a way. So right there, is something that's so compelling, that their focus of their metrics, and they say once chocolate is slave-free, they will actually go on to a new venture. They will literally fold. So, I think it's a new way to kind of look at social good. Another one is Source, which is used to be Zero Mass Water and located right in Arizona. They're starting to cover metrics around how they can help villages and communities, how they can bring water out of thin air, to places that don't have water. That's very purpose driven when you change the conversation from selling, sell things that make water to, we're solving a systemic problem. And now, I think their growth is just going to be exceptional over the next 15 years as people learn about that. And even Tesla is a big example, or Elon Musk. Everything he does is purpose driven. In 2006, he said he was a sustainable energy company. Some of his goals are so big that people don't understand it. Well, now we're starting to really understand his goals. And obviously people have bought into it as he's created the largest automotive company. But he even has a removing of carbon, the X Prize for $100 million he just put out. All that aligns to some of his major goals that he's purpose driven. So himself, his metrics that he's judging himself against, they're so much bigger. And that's where thinking big is kind of part of the equation than what other people are judging him against, that he's actually, yielding good results in that. So those are some good examples of things that stand out to me. And that's where small companies that are just starting out have to think like, where would I want to be seen in 5 years, and actually think like that now, because they're not going to ever get there if they don't start thinking that way now.
Wow, incredible. Danya, I want to kind of connect that point to what you were talking about with imposter syndrome and kind of these emotions that entrepreneurs may feel just getting started. And for you, it's not just a product line. You talked about in your why story, really wanting to change this whole crime or this whole kind of behavior that happens with drugging drinks and approach that market. Can you talk about, what does that mean as a person who wants to make change when you're approaching these big problems? How do you start to break that down?
That's a great question of how do you keep yourself separate from your company when it is social driven and such a part of you. I was so fortunate, separate cohort, but alongside Yossuf, to participate in an incubator program called Halcyon. And one of the main tenets that they taught you from the beginning was, how are you doing 1 to 10 personally, and how are you doing 1 to 10 professionally? So understanding, especially when you're just starting your company, that your company can be doing really well, but you as a founder are not doing well, or you as a founder are doing great, the company's doing really poorly. And what that did for me was instill that element of separation, which is really important to help maintain just momentum. Because at the end of the day, we're just machines working on these companies. If we are not doing well, then our company is not going to do well. So it's a very selfish thing as well. I really liked what Aaron said also about highlighting Simon Sinek. And I know when I first was starting, I watched Simon Sinek's TED Talk of Know Your Why. And I really enjoyed that we started this conversation of what is your why, because I think in a lot of social minded startups, founders have amazing why stories. And when you're going to choose a specific issue, right, any entrepreneur, beyond social, right, in any tech field, why are you spending so much time on this element? I would say for anyone in the audience who has not watched Simon Sinek's TED Talk, I'm going to paraphrase the title, but Know Your Why pretty much, please take the time to do that. That changed the entire way I looked at how I present my company. And here's the cliff note hanger. His takeaway was, you need to be communicating the why of your company, not your what. So you'll see when we talked about, when I share about my company, I don't say we sell empowerment tools against drink spiking. No, because the why is we work to empower individuals against drink spiking. The how is that we do it through education and empowerment tools. And then the what is, okay, here, now let's talk about the actual mode of delivery of the empowerment tool. And it's just flipping that. So you get people on your side bought in to say, yeah, drink spiking is a big issue. Now here's how we can create change together. So it's all about the join us, the momentum of having people buy into what you're doing, which is so important in any company. but specifically socially backed companies where you really need to have not only the buy-in from people saying this is an issue, we need to change this, but also people saying, I want to take my resources, my time, and help you accomplish your vision. So
I love what the freedom that comes with that means as well, Danya, is that the what can change and the why doesn't have to. So I think that's there's a lot of freedom in that as well. So I love the centering on starting there.
And I always say too, I didn't fall in love with our product. I fell in love with combating our issue. So to that point, I am so passionate about combating drink spiking that if tomorrow the product had to change, right? And it did because of COVID, right? And how people were drinking and socializing and making sure we were staying up on trends, that we could pivot as necessary with our why intact. And, you know, when any startup, you know, sometimes you get distracted. You want to boil the ocean before you can boil the pot. And knowing your why will help you be able to say, no, I can't take on this part of the company. Maybe 5 years we'll reevaluate. Maybe next month we'll reevaluate. But right now we need to stay laser focused on achieving our end goal.
Yossuf, tossing it over to you. I mean, in your entrepreneurial journey over the past 4 years, you mentioned, have you had to go through that pivot and the how, and how's that journey looked for you?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Danya's statement around the why being kind of your North Star, and that's very centered. To me, you know, from the beginning, both my co-founder and I, you know, we always started the company on the premise that we wanted to prevent substance abuse and addiction. And to be honest, like there was an aha moment. And the solution that exists today that's in the market is very similar to the idea that we had. So I think we're lucky in that respect. But of course, a lot has changed. If we didn't really spend a lot of time rigorously testing the market early on. So for example, we didn't build a product except a year or a year and a half into our company. We spent the first year plus just talking to patients, talking to physicians, talking to our potential customers, and just getting as much data from the field before spending a dime. I think we got a small grant from Wake Forest, my previous university, and it was like $3,000. I think I used that to incorporate the company and then maybe write up a patent that never really registered because actually the product changed. And so, you know, my recommendation is don't spend money when you don't need to. I think early on, you're just trying to get an idea of whether or not this product, this idea may work. And if it doesn't, it gives you the ability to quickly pivot. I've advised, like I've been lucky enough over the last year and a half to advise a few startups, and I've seen them pivot within the first 2 months. You know, and I stressed on the point of not spending money early on so that you can pivot into a different product if you have to. But I've also seen startups spend, you know, 200K on development, on software development, on an app that in reality no one really wanted. And so after spending all this money and time, it's very hard for you to pivot because your runway is short, and you may run out of money before you even create an impact. So I guess long story short, the whys remain the same. The product has definitely changed over time, but the mode in which we wanted to create that impact has changed. There was always a gap in the market when it comes to prescription monitoring. We knew when a patient got prescribed the medication, we knew what quantity it was, but we never knew how the patient was really using it. And no one really knew when addiction started to manifest. And so we knew that, you know, the main solution for that is to create a remote monitoring device. The mechanism by which we monitor definitely changed, but the underlying kind of technology has stayed the same. But if we didn't test the market early on, I really believe we probably would have been off the mark.
Incredible discipline as well to to force yourself and the company to stay in the customer discovery phase for that long. A lot of entrepreneurs, don't have that discipline and end up crashing and burning later. So it's a great example to share. Erin, can you talk about, from a global standpoint or a national standpoint, when people talk about social impact as an entrepreneur or as a business, has that meaning evolved or has that scope evolved over the past 10, 15 years, or how is that comparative?
Yeah, I think so I've had the fortune to work with a lot of startups that have really grown exponentially, as well as work at very large companies like Daimler and Coca-Cola and work on their innovation. And in big companies, social good was put into a department, corporate responsibility. That has started to morph more and more into the C-suite. And I think we're more recognizing, with the CEO of BlackRock even putting a challenge to all CEOs about board diversity, about the environment, about investing in sustainable businesses, because there's this premium for social good, meaning that companies that have this as part of their strategy actually perform better over time, probably because they appeal to more people and the social impact part of it. 10 to 15 years ago, candidly, I gave a speech at Net Impact, which is an organization that is always focused on social good. And I really believe that all entrepreneurship is social good, meaning if you can create employment for yourself, feed your family, if you hire one person, you've really actually started to create an impact on society. I think we so much think of these kind of grandiose, even the ideas I shared before is like social goods way up here. Well, it's actually, creating, meaning to your life. If you can find your why, like these two other great founders on this call, they're never going to work another day in their life. Their what's probably going to change several times throughout their career. And that's where working with CEOs of big companies and even startups, all companies have to pivot as markets shift and the business model demands shift. So I think, as we look at exponential companies and they serve these ecosystems, they think more systemically, and it's starting to put initiatives and social good into the culture, not just into a department. And you're seeing that at companies like, Airbnb shifting during COVID. They've really had to figure out how do we stay alive as a company, but how do we actually come back stronger, so we can be more resilient, which is, a company that was pretty much devastated by COVID, but now is kind of clawing their way back. So I think, it is what I've liked about the other founders, what they've said on this call is, finding out something that you're passionate about. I love the fact that Yossuf spent a year on customers, getting the data and really understanding what the problem is, because candidly, a lot of people have what I'll call bar conversations and you talk about problems and they're very superficial. But the real systemic problem is probably more than 5 whys away, if anybody familiar with that kind of asking those whys. So getting the data, creating the knowledge, understanding it, and then applying it where I think you have the wisdom. And that's really the scientific method for startups. If you can kind of push yourself through that process and be diligent to talk to enough customers, you're going to find a problem worth solving. And somewhere along the line, you're just going to have an emotional connection to that why of that problem. And like I said, then getting up in the morning is really easy. What you do will probably change quite a bit as you evolve, as your thinking gets bigger and bigger. It's just, like Facebook didn't start off to have 2.6 billion people. It started off to, put people's pictures online in a school, and then step by step expanded, kind of its mission, some for good, some for bad, it's the judgment's out on that. But I think what you look at is big thinking obviously is going to grow people's mission and purpose, which means that their day-to-day what has to change. And it's why very few CEOs kind of grow up with their company. They generally are a very good startup CEO, or they're a very good operational CEO or a public CEO. You see very few people kind of go through that. And I mean, I can only name a couple of them, even looking at all the companies out there. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what's changed over the last 10 to 15 years. I think we have evolved, and I think it's become a more central part of the conversation, in particular in this last year.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of keep it there, and let's transition to this past year. Aaron, you shared some examples with me before the call about some companies who are really responding to the social injustices that have come to light and been a focus over the past year, as well as the global pandemic. And what should we expect to see in maybe the next upcoming year in response to everything that we've been through?
Yeah. So, kind of to build on this, what's happened in the last year? Obviously, we're on a Zoom conference that would have been in person, would have been a different experience. But I worked for literally the last 10 years working with major companies on their digital transformations, how to be more innovative, how to be more entrepreneurial, how to work with accelerators and incubators, how to actually bring new innovation and stop spending, billions of dollars on R&D when you can go out and invest in startup ecosystems, like SeedSpot, and, really get these ideas that you can boil up to really, get the data you need and such. But we just went through the largest digital transformation ever. I mean, literally hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars is spent on digital transformation over the last 10 years. And it was just forced upon us in a very short amount of time. With that, by being stuck at home, we unsurfaced some inequities that have always been there, but that I think for the first time you saw a shift in society where, systemic racism was a conversation that not just people that it affected, were part of. And we were at home, we saw, the things, we just obviously went through the trial, which was fairly quickly done. With that, it unsurfaced, companies started looking at their data. And now with everybody at home with more time, we could see the disparities, and, that we've always known in Silicon Valley companies or in startups. And if you want to serve a population, an ecosystem, you have to have a company that represents that ecosystem. So the fact is that data for inequities came out, and also for the planet. An example, whales, migratory and birth patterns were really affected by all the cruise ships, by the noise they make. And they've literally proven that in a very short amount of time that we're dramatically affecting whale populations because their mothers can't go feed with the group and then bring the food back. They want to stay with their kids because they can't hear them. Same with turtle populations, and just like little things that have, the beaches in Florida are so crowded that this is the first time the beaches were empty, and the turtle populations are literally 100x. But it shows you the resilience of our planet. And I think the biggest example that I can kind of throw in, well, another quick example, in LA, pollution in 4 days of no traffic in LA had a 40-year high of air quality just in 4 days. So that shows you the resilience of our Earth. With that said, we also now can recognize the impact, and I think that goes to a bigger conversation around thinking big. And I'll use Chernobyl, which in Russia had the biggest nuclear meltdown 35 years ago. What's interesting about the resilience of Earth, in that we must take action, now, and it needs to be part of every company. And every big company has really put to, a 2030 or 2040 to say we're going to be carbon free. And when I say every big company, I mean the companies that are social media and technology have literally started to lead this trend because they understand they have to be in front of it beyond being persecuted. But Chernobyl, which happened 35 years ago, basically killed a part of our planet that will never be able to live, like 20,000 years before people will actually be able to live there. You can go visit there, but what's happened is wildlife and the Earth has taken back over. And even they discovered radioactive eating fungi that's literally making the radioactive danger, it's consuming it to actually make it a clean process. So that's nature just handling its course. And that's a conversation that now I'm starting to have at the board level of companies around exponential theory and exponential thinking is, okay, how, if these data, what are the things that could impact your company in the future? What are the things you could do now to actually give back to nature? Because that's going to be good for you, for your shareholders and stakeholders and combined. But I think COVID really is forcing a lot of very obvious situations to force changes, both in startups and how you think about you're going to grow, which I think startups will continue to become more and more social good oriented because they're solving a problem. And that's what generally a good startup solves with the problem. and really grows from there, from the data, understanding how to impact that and grow it from there. So from both sides of that equation, I see that we're moving towards more of a social good. Otherwise, companies will get persecuted, and you see it every day in social media, the awareness of companies that are not doing good, small and big. And I think that's not going to go away. Social media is pervasive and here to stay. So.
Yeah, if we've learned anything in the past year, really appreciate all that reflection, and just thankful to Danya and Yossuf and all of our social impact entrepreneurs on the call as well for being part of that. For those who may be on the call, Yossuf, who either are looking to double down on their impact, or they've had an idea, they want to get started. In your experience, what would your advice be to them for how to actually get started being a social impact entrepreneur?
Yeah, no, I think Aaron made very good points there. And I think being intentional at the start is very important, right? Like, you're sure every company today is thinking about social impact, but don't do it just because everyone else is doing it. Really hone in on a problem that matters to you, but can also be scaled. And that's why customer discovery is really important. You want to make sure that it's not only you that's suffering from this problem. Enough people out there are also going through something similar, so you can actually bring something to market that could be impactful. I think also suppressing the ego as founders, and I've also, I think we've all fallen victim to this. When we think of an idea that really matters to us, we sometimes can get clouded, and it's very, very tough. But I really believe non-biased data can solve this problem. When you go out there and start to test the market, try to have someone go with you, so that you have someone else that's vetting the information that you're getting. In the beginning, it was me and my co-founder. I really tried to be as disciplined as possible to bring him with me. And then, even though he was working more on the tech, but also that fed into the product. So it wasn't just me telling him, hey, I think we should do this, but he was hearing it from potential users, from potential customers. If you don't have a co-founder, bring a friend. So go out there. Everything starts outside the room, outside the building. There's a saying. So get out there and start to test out your ideas, and don't feel pressured to go into something that you don't wholeheartedly believe in. There's a lot of, it's a tough journey. There's no way around it. I think Danya, Aaron can attest to that. It takes a lot of time to kind of reap the benefits of your work. So that's where the passion comes into play. So yeah.
Great advice. Danya, you've mentioned before, entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint, and you shared even earlier about, touched on the importance of prioritizing your mental health. Can you share, are there any recommendations that you would have for these entrepreneurs to make a part of their practice or implement so that they can accomplish that marathon?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'd say the best thing I've been able to do for myself is find people like Yossuf, find people in my circles that are going through similar journeys, and be able to really, as Yossuf mentioned, take down that ego and say, this is really what I'm going through. These are the struggles professionally I'm going through. These are the struggles personally I'm going through. Finding those confidants and being comfortable sharing. And I think sometimes it's really hard to actually say what's going on. I'd also say one of my mentors just purchased me this book called Oak. This is not a product placement, I promise. But I will say he just purchased this for me. And it's a great reflective journal. And I don't know if Aaron or Yossuf or Lauren, you guys journal, but I was really having a tough time with a lot of the change that was going on in the company, a lot of the decisions I was having to make that were impacting the long-term strategy of the company that was changing. And what my mentor Murray said was, journal everything, make goals and stick to it and hold yourself accountable. So I am now doing a process called the 10-10-10 every morning. So I wake up every morning and the first thing I do is I meditate for 10 minutes. Then after that, I read for 10 minutes. And after that, I journal for 10 minutes. And I hold myself accountable to that 30 minutes. So I set my alarm clock 30 minutes earlier, made it part of my process. And I will tell you, it has made me more self-aware of where anxieties are coming from, because it's one thing to feel stressed, it's another to be able to acknowledge where those tension points are. And yeah, I really think that we are a product of the people we surround ourselves with. Also, I will say a lot of the people who are not in the entrepreneurial realm may very well, who have the greatest of intentions, highlight all of the things that can go wrong. Right? How often is it that I say, I have a new business idea, and that person says it's stupid for A, B, C, D reasons, but really they have great intentions because they care about you and they just want you to succeed. But granted, what you need to hear in that moment might be, I don't see your vision, but I believe in you. And so I believe that you can do it. So making sure you surround yourself with people of different levels. I know Yossuf mentioned making sure when you do those interviews, having unbiased people that are present that can counter what you think that you heard. Make sure you have different groups of people, right? So I have my groups of people if I need professional advice. I have groups of people if I just want to go out and grab a mimosa and talk about the college years, right? Granted, I'm happy to grab mimosas with you, Yossuf, any day and talk business or professional or personal. But that's just to say, have people that you know. And the greatest, and I'll wrap up on this note, the greatest thing I've done mental health wise is, well, first off, therapy, amazing, huge proponent. If you need to talk to someone, please, 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 speak with a therapist. Mental health is so important. 2, start exercising. And 3, I will say, just make sure when you call someone, tell them in the first part of the conversation what you need. So I can say, hey, Lauren, are you free for 15 minutes? Because I just need to vent. And Lauren could be the type of amazing friend that wants to give advice right away, but I don't want to hear any advice in that moment. I just want to lament and then be done and then come back to Lauren the next day and say, what's your advice? Granted, if I need advice, I could say, hey, Lauren, I really need advice right now. Do you have 15 minutes? Really clarifying the intentions of the call, make sure that there's as little lack of communication. And really, I guess what I'm saying is communication is so important. So just be open and all's good and go for it. There's so many reasons to not do something and maybe only one to do it. Just do it. Shia LaBeouf, just do it. So there you go.
Amazing advice for entrepreneurship and life. Thank you so much, Danya. Kate, I know we've got some questions from our awesome audience, so I'd love to go to you.
We do. I'm going to start off with one. So now is your chance to ask a direct question to this this incredible panel. If you could do so in Whova, then we can interact with you afterward as well. So here's the question. From a KPI and attribution standpoint, how are you able to isolate your business activities and the impact you're having on bigger societal issues? For instance, how can you substantiate to an investor your education content impact, reducing the number of tables, number of pills diverted, etc., to you, Yossuf, business as an example, versus social impact activities from other groups? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I guess maybe to sum it up. So how do you basically differentiate those two metrics to shareholders and investors? How do you kind of differentiate the two when giving investor updates? Or
I understood it to say, how do you substantiate to an investor your education content impact?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. You know, I think first of all, you want to attract investors that believe in the impact that you're making. You don't want investors that simply care about the 10, 50x that they may make on their money. Even though you could show that, because at the end of the day, startups are risky. There's always going to, startups fail. Like 80 to 90% of startups fail. So you want to make sure that investors are coming in with that mindset. And typically what we do in our outreach, we send investor updates every month, regardless of the amount of money that each investor invested. They all get the same update. And we're very, very clear about the number of patients that we've impacted month on month. We track pills utilized, any types of reductions over time. All this data is tracked and it's provided back to investors. And then we also have a financial KPI update in that section, and it's very clear. Amount of money that was spent on product, on the company, on the team, any revenues, and how much runway we have left. So I think you need to start by being really conscious about the investors that you bring on. I think the hardest thing is bringing on investors that simply care about the money that could be made, because you won't be able to deal with investors that simply care about the money. At the end of the day, you are starting a social impact business, and you need to be. It's equally important to mention the impact that you're making on patients' lives versus the amount of money that you're making monthly.
Awesome. And then we had a question for you, Danya. Can you share the name of the book that your mentor mentioned to you? Was it Oak?
Yes, it's called Oak. It's called Oak. Let me see. Yeah, it's a red book. Super, super awesome. Oak.
Fantastic.
And the back it says oakjournal.com. It's been awesome.
Wonderful. Well, Aaron, Danya, Yossuf, Lauren, thank you so much for this panel. I'm definitely going to go check out that documentary on chocolate now, and add it to the things I shouldn't be doing. And hopefully we learned from you and your venture. I hope your ventures are successful, and we learned about social good. Thank you so much.